Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. It was supposed to be just another Sunday afternoon game at Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati. The sun blazed down on perfectly maintained grass, and the familiar scent of hot dogs and popcorn wafted through the air. I remember checking my grip on the bat during the third inning, focusing on the rhythm of my breathing, like I always did before stepping up to the plate. The scoreboard showed 2-1 in our favor. Everything was normal, perfect even. Then I heard the first scream. At first, it was just background noise, the kind you get used to in a stadium filled with 30,000 fans. But this was different, sharp, desperate. It cut through the usual crowd buzz like a knife. I glanced toward the third base stands where a commotion was building. Several security guards were running up the steps, their yellow jackets bright against the crowd. Probably just some drunk fans getting rowdy, Pete muttered from the dugout. But something felt off. The screaming didn't stop. It multiplied. I watched as more security personnel rushed toward Section 124. The pitcher, Mike Thompson, stood frozen on the mound, his eyes fixed on the growing disturbance. The umpire called time, but nobody was paying attention to the game anymore. A wave of movement rippled through the crowd as people began standing up, pointing, backing away from whatever was happening in that section. Then I saw it. A man in a red jersey lunged forward, his mouth latched onto a woman's shoulder. She shrieked, a sound that still haunts me. Blood, bright red against her white blouse, spread quickly across the fabric. People nearby scrambled to get away, creating a domino effect of panic that spread through the stands. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm." The announcer's voice crackled over the speakers, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his tone. "Security personnel are handling the situation. Please stay in your seats." Nobody listened. The chaos was spreading faster than anyone could control. More screams erupted from different sections of the stadium. I saw people shoving each other, climbing over seats, running toward the exits. The sound changed from the usual stadium roar to something primal, pure terror amplified by concrete walls. Coach Williams grabbed my arm. "Everyone in the dugout now!" His face was pale, eyes wide with an urgency I'd never seen before. As I jumped down the steps, I kept my bat in my hand. Something deep inside told me I might need it. From the dugout, we watched in horror as the situation deteriorated. The woman who'd been bitten was now attacking others, moving with a violent intensity that seemed impossible. The man in the red jersey had already taken down 2 more people. And the victims, they weren't staying down. "They're blocking all the exits," our catcher Ryan said, his voice shaking. He was right. The main concourse was a scene of absolute mayhem. People were pressed against each other, desperate to escape, but something was preventing them from getting out. The screaming got louder. Coach tried calling 911 but couldn't get through. "Lines are busy," he muttered, his fingers trembling as he tried again and again. The radio broadcaster was still in his booth, now describing the scene with increasing panic in his voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're seeing multiple incidents of violence throughout the stadium. Emergency services have been contacted. Please try to exit in an orderly fashion." His voice cut off mid-sentence. Through the glass of the broadcast booth, I watched as something crashed through the door behind him. The microphone picked up his last scream before going silent. The field had become a refuge of sorts. While chaos reigned in the stands, the open space of the playing field remained relatively clear. But that was changing. People were starting to jump down from the lower levels, some breaking ankles and legs in their desperation to escape the growing violence above. "We need to get out of here," Pete said, stating the obvious. But where? The tunnel to the locker rooms was already filled with fleeing stadium staff. And beyond that, who knew? I gripped my bat tighter. The familiar feel of worn wood against my palm, the only normal thing left in a world that had suddenly gone mad. Through the dugout fence, I watched as a security guard tried to help an injured woman. She turned on him with frightening speed. teeth tearing into his neck. Blood sprayed across the warning track. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the stadium as people smashed windows, looking for any way out. But for every person who escaped, more seemed to join the ranks of the attackers. They moved differently, not running or walking, but lurching forward with single-minded aggression. Their faces were transformed, vacant yet somehow filled with hunger. Coach Williams made a decision. Equipment room, now. We can barricade ourselves in until help arrives. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than staying in the exposed dugout. As we moved toward the tunnel, I looked back at the field one last time. The pristine green grass was now stained with dark patches. The afternoon sun still shone brightly, indifferent to the horror unfolding below. My last glimpse of the stadium I'd called home for 3 seasons was of bodies falling from the upper deck, people clawing at each other in the stands, and the relentless spread of violence that seemed to infect everyone it touched. The familiar has become alien in mere minutes, and I knew with crushing certainty that nothing would ever be the same. We ran into the darkness of the tunnel, the sounds of screaming and chaos following us down into the bowels of the stadium. My bat, which had hit countless home runs, now felt like the only thing standing between us and whatever madness had been unleashed above. The first part of the longest day of my life had just begun. The tunnel beneath Riverfront Stadium had always felt safe before, just concrete and pipes, the veins and arteries of the building. But now the darkness pressed in around us, broken only by scattered emergency lights that cast sickly yellow pools every 30 feet. The air grew thick with the smell of sweat and fear as we moved deeper into the complex. 7 of us made it to the equipment room: Coach Williams, Pete, Ryan, myself, and 3 rookies whose names I hadn't learned yet. The metallic taste of adrenaline filled my mouth as we barricaded the door with storage lockers and equipment crates. The sounds from above filtered through the ceiling, screaming, running, the occasional crash that made dust drift down from the pipes. "What the hell is happening up there?" one of the rookies whispered, his voice cracking. Nobody answered. We all had seen enough to know this wasn't just riot or mass panic. The infected were driven by something more primitive, more terrifying than simple violence. Ryan found an old radio on one of the shelves and tried to tune in to local stations. Through the static, fragments of reports painted a horrifying picture. Similar incidents were breaking out across the city. The words infection and quarantine kept repeating. Emergency services were overwhelmed. The National Guard was being mobilized. "They're saying it's some kind of virus," Ryan said, his face illuminated by the radio's dim display. "People are getting sick, becoming violent. The bite marks, they're how it spreads." A heavy impact against the door made us all jump. Something was out there, slamming against the metal with mindless persistence. We could hear a wet, guttural sound, like breathing through a mouthful of fluid. Coach Williams motioned for silence, and we stood frozen as footsteps dragged past our hiding place. The emergency lights flickered, and for a moment we were plunged into complete darkness. When they came back on, Pete was checking his phone. "No signal," he muttered. "But before it went dead, I saw videos. It's not just here, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Columbus, it's everywhere." The reality of our situation began to sink in. We weren't just hiding from a temporary crisis. Whatever this infection was, it spread with terrifying speed, turning ordinary people into creatures of pure instinct and hunger. A scream echoed through the tunnel, closer this time. Then another. The sound of running feet approached, followed by the heavier thuds of pursuit. We pressed against the walls, hardly daring to breathe. Through a small window in the door, I watched as 2 stadium employees sprinted past, terror on their faces. Behind them came 3 infected, moving with that same mindless drive we'd seen upstairs. They had blood smeared across their faces and clothes. Their eyes were vacant, pupils dilated with a predatory fixation on their prey. No thought, no hesitation. Just the raw impulse to chase and feed. They caught the slower of the 2 employees just past our door. His screams turned to wet gurgles as they tore into him. The other one made it around the corner, her footsteps fading into the darkness. "We can't stay here," I whispered once the sounds of feeding stopped. "If they pick up our scent." "The loading dock," Coach Williams said. "It's on the other side of the building, but it's our best shot at getting out." He pulled out a ring of keys, thank God for small mercies. These should get us through the security doors. We gathered what we could use as weapons, baseball bats, of course, a few metal equipment poles. Ryan found a fire axe in its emergency case. The rookies were shaking, but they held their makeshift weapons with grim determination. After checking the tunnel through the window, we moved the barricade away from the door as quietly as possible. The emergency lights cast long shadows that seemed to move on their own. Every sound, the scuff of a shoe, the clink of metal, made us freeze. Knowing those things responded to the slightest noise like sharks to blood in water. We moved in formation, Coach Williams leading with the keys, me and Pete on the flanks with our bats. The rookies stayed in the middle, with Ryan bringing up the rear, axe at the ready. The first security door was about 50 yards away. Beyond that, 2 more sections of tunnel stood between us and potential freedom. The body of the employee lay where they had left it, a dark pool spreading beneath the torn remains. We had to step around it. One of the rookies gagged, but managed to keep quiet. The smell. I'll never forget that smell. Like copper and rot and something else. Something that triggered every survival instinct in my body. We made it to the first door. Coach's hands trembled as he tried the keys, metal scratching against metal. Behind us, something crashed in the darkness. Keys jangled louder than they had any right to be. More sounds echoed through the tunnel. That awful wet breathing. The scrape of feet being dragged across concrete. The lock clicked. We slipped through the door just as shapes emerged from the shadows behind us. I caught a glimpse of blood-stained jerseys, faces twisted with animalistic rage. Coach Williams slammed the door shut, and we all pressed against it as bodies thudded against the other side. The lock held, but the sounds they made, pure, primal hunger. "They're moving in packs," Pete said, his voice hoarse, like animals drawn to the same prey, pure predatory instinct. "We need to keep moving," Coach cut him off. "Next section is maintenance. Lots of blind corners, stay alert." The maintenance section was a maze of smaller tunnels and storage rooms. Pipes lined the walls and ceiling, hissing occasionally with steam or water. Our footsteps echoed no matter how carefully we walked. Every shadow could conceal death. Every corner could be our last. We found more bodies. Stadium staff, security guards, fans who had somehow made it down here. Some were clearly dead, torn apart by the feeding frenzy. But some were just lying there, twitching, the bite marks on their skin turning dark and swollen. We gave them wide berth. The transformation was inevitable. The infection worked fast. We'd seen it upstairs. Minutes, maybe seconds after being bitten, the victims turned. Their humanity vanished, replaced by an all-consuming drive to attack and spread the virus. No reason, no mercy, just the endless need to infect others. As we approached the second security door, a sound stopped us cold. From somewhere ahead came children's voices, crying, calling for help. One of the rookies started forward, but Coach Williams grabbed his arm. "Wait," he whispered. "We don't know if they're..." He couldn't finish the sentence. We all understood. The infected didn't distinguish between victims. Adult, child, friend, family. Once turned, they attacked anything alive with equal savagery. We had to make a choice. The loading dock was to the right. The crying came from the left. Time was running out. We could hear more infected moving through the tunnels behind us, drawn by sound and movement and whatever primal senses guided them to fresh prey. Whatever we decided, we had to decide fast. I gripped my bat tighter, the wood now slick with sweat. The longest afternoon of my life wasn't even close to being over. "My sister works at the CDC," Pete whispered as we huddled in the corridor. "Last week she mentioned reports about a new rabies strain in the Midwest. Said it was nothing like they'd seen before." He gripped his bat tighter, called it a zombie variant pathogen. We all laughed it off then. Nobody was laughing now. The term clicked into place, matching the horror we'd witnessed upstairs. The mindless aggression, the spreading through bites, the rapid transformation. It all fit the pattern we'd seen in countless movies. except this was terrifyingly real. The children's cries pierced the stale air again. Coach Williams made the call. "Loading dock," he said firmly. "Those voices are bouncing off the walls. Could be coming from anywhere, and we can't risk getting cornered searching for them." We pressed forward through the maintenance tunnels, a maze of pipes and cramped passages. Steam leaked from overhead valves, creating patches of white mist that diffused the weak emergency lighting. The resulting haze transformed every shadow into a potential threat. A metallic clatter rang out ahead. We halted, straining to see through the vapor. 3 infected emerged from the gloom, their clothes shredded and stained crimson, their faces contorted into expressions of pure animal hunger. "Back up slowly," Coach whispered. "There's another route through the..." The youngest rookie stumbled into a valve, releasing a blast of scalding steam. He yelped, more in surprise than pain, but the sound might as well have been a dinner bell. The infected snapped toward us with that terrible predatory focus. They charged with savage intensity. Ryan swung his axe, catching the first one in the shoulder. The creature didn't register the injury, continuing its assault until Pete crushed its skull. More infected poured from the side passages, drawn by the commotion. "Move!" Coach Williams shouted. Stealth abandoned, we sprinted through the vapor-filled corridor. The rookies' panicked breathing and our pounding footsteps drew more infected from their hunting grounds. We reached a 3-way split. The path ahead led to the loading dock, while side passages connected to storage and generator rooms. Dense steam obscured everything beyond a few feet, transforming the space into a white void filled with shifting shapes. The rookie lost his footing on the wet floor. Pete and I grabbed his arms, hauling him forward while Ryan defended our rear. His axe cut deadly arcs through the mist, buying precious seconds. The infected's feral shrieks reverberated through the metal passages. Coach Williams wrestled with his keys at the next security door. The infected pressed closer. One lunged at Ryan, who buried his axe in its head. The weapon stuck fast. Another infected clamped onto his leg from below. "Ryan!" I moved to help, but Pete's iron grip held me back. "Don't!" Pete pulled me toward the door. Through the swirling vapor, I watched Ryan vanish beneath a surge of grasping hands and snapping jaws. His final cry cut through the chaos like a knife. We pushed through the doorway, slamming it on the nightmare behind us. The rookie sagged against the wall, cradling his steam-scalded arm. Coach Williams braced himself against the door as it shuddered under repeated impacts. "They'll break through," Pete said grimly, "or find another way around. They never stop hunting." The final stretch of tunnel spread before us, mercifully free of steam, but the improved visibility revealed the true extent of the carnage. Bodies of stadium staff and fans lay scattered across the concrete floor, some motionless, others still in the process of turning. The rookie's breathing grew ragged. I noticed a tear in his jersey just above the burn, and beneath it, the unmistakable crescent of teeth marks. In the chaos of our escape, none of us had seen him get bitten. "When?" Coach Williams asked, his voice heavy. "The first group," the rookie admitted. "I thought, maybe if I didn't say anything." His words slurred as beads of sweat formed on his forehead. Dark veins began to surface beneath his skin. "I'll handle it," Coach said quietly. "You two scout ahead. Make sure the loading dock is clear." "Coach," I started. "That's an order." His tone left no room for argument. "Don't waste his sacrifice." Pete guided me forward. Behind us, Coach Williams spoke softly. "You played a good game, son." A single sharp impact followed, the sound final and merciless. Natural light filtered through the loading dock's metal door. Real sunlight, not the artificial glare we'd been living under. But the open space around the exit created a killing field, perfect for the infected's ambush instincts. Coach Williams rejoined us, his expression carved from stone. Words failed in the face of what he'd had to do, what we'd all had to do. The late afternoon sun beckoned through the door's seams. We were almost out, but experience had taught us bitter lessons about hope. The infected had transformed our home field into a hunting ground, and we still had to cross the most dangerous part. I adjusted my grip on the bat, the wood grain familiar against my calloused palms. Beyond that door lay either salvation or damnation. The next pitch would be for all the marbles, and we couldn't afford to strike out. The loading dock stretched before us like an arena, 40 feet of exposed concrete between our position and freedom. Sunlight spilled through gaps around the main door, illuminating abandoned pallets and overturned equipment. The industrial space magnified each footstep, each ragged breath. "The light might give us an advantage," Pete whispered. "They're just predators following basic instincts." Coach Williams surveyed our options. 2 personnel doors flanked the main loading gate. A forklift stood abandoned near the center, keys still in the ignition. Scattered crates and equipment created a treacherous obstacle course between us and escape. "I'll get the gate controls," I said, nodding toward the panel mounted beside the main door. The mechanism could provide our escape route, assuming it still worked. I moved forward, sticking to illuminated areas. The others maintained their positions, guarding different angles. My cleats produced soft clicks against concrete with each careful step. The control panel's emergency light pulsed steadily, backup power still functioning. As I reached for the switch, a rustling sound emerged from behind stacked boxes. Pete raised his bat, edging closer to investigate. A dock worker burst into view, his safety vest now stained crimson. Vacant eyes locked onto Pete as the infected worker charged forward. Pete pivoted, his bat connecting with practiced precision. The infected collapsed in a heap. More figures appeared, emerging from their hiding spots. They spilled from doorways and shadows, a dozen mindless predators converging on fresh prey. I activated the gate control. Metal groaned as ancient machinery pulled the massive door upward at an agonizing pace. "Defensive positions," Coach Williams commanded. We backed toward the rising gate in tight formation. The infected shambled closer, former staff members and fans now reduced to pure killing instinct. The gate shuddered to a stop barely 4 feet high, its motor grinding against an obstruction. Through the gap, I glimpsed the players' parking lot and our vehicles. So close, yet impossibly far. An infected woman in shredded office wear launched herself at Coach Williams. His swing sent her sprawling. 2 more took her place immediately. Pete knocked one back while I dispatched the other, the impact vibrating through my bat. "Get under the gate," Coach Williams shouted between defensive swings. "I'll cover your escape." "Not happening," Pete snapped. "Together or not at all." The horde pressed forward, their single-minded aggression forcing us back step by step. Each fallen infected seemed to summon 2 more. The commotion drew others from deeper within the building, a parade of savage hunger. My gaze landed on the forklift. "The machine!" I called out. "We can block them!" Pete caught my meaning instantly. He fought his way to the vehicle while Coach Williams and I provided cover. The engine roared to life, the sound triggering a fresh wave of hostility from our pursuers. Pete reversed toward us, using the steel forks as a barrier. We retreated behind the improvised wall as he positioned it alongside the gate. The infected hurled themselves against the metal, driven by nothing but base hunger. "Move!" Pete revved the engine, using the forklift's mass as a shield. "Run while you can!" Coach Williams and I dove under the gate, rolling across rough asphalt. I turned back to see Pete abandon his position, sprinting for the gap as infected poured over the vehicle. Grasping hands caught his leg. Pete kicked wildly, but more infected latched on, pulling him backward. Coach Williams grabbed Pete's arms, straining against the horrific tug of war. I joined the effort, but the infected's grip proved relentless. "Save yourselves," Pete yelled. Blood flowed from a bite wound in his calf. "They got me, go!" Coach Williams maintained his hold. "Not another one," he snarled. "Not here, not today." I snatched up a broken pipe and swung through the opening, striking the infected closest to Pete. Their grasp weakened for a crucial moment. We yanked him to safety as more infected reached through the gap, clawing at empty air. Pete sprawled on the pavement, clutching his mangled leg. The bite wound left no room for denial. "Should have left me," he muttered. Coach Williams withdrew his car keys. "My vehicle's right there, plenty of room. You know what happens next. Listen carefully." Coach Williams cut him off. "The CDC facility is nearby. Your sister might have answers. Maybe there's a treatment window, maybe not. but we're not adding to today's body count. The infected battered against the gate, their impact creating an apocalyptic percussion. Sunset painted the stadium in blood-red hues. Night approached, promising fresh horrors in the darkness. I helped Pete stand, supporting him as we moved toward the SUV. Coach Williams took point, bat raised. The open parking lot felt vulnerable, but at least offered clear sight lines in all directions. The stadium loomed behind us, its familiar profile transformed into something monstrous. Inside, lost children still called for help. Ryan's remains lay in a steam-filled corridor. The rookie's final moments played out in shadow, and countless others, friends, co-workers, strangers, prowled the halls, stripped of everything but predatory drive. We reached the vehicle as the gate mechanism failed completely. Metal crashed downward with ground-shaking force. The infected's howls diminished but didn't cease. Eventually, their endless hunt would find another exit. Stadium always did have bad feng shui, Pete mumbled as we eased him into the back seat. A weak attempt at humor, but we embraced it. Laughter, even hollow, meant we were still human. Coach Williams fired up the engine. Pillars of smoke rose from the city. Emergency sirens created a chaotic symphony. The infection spread through our hometown like wildfire. But we had a destination, a purpose, perhaps even a cure. I watched the stadium recede in the mirror. America's pastime had transformed into something unthinkable in mere hours. The rules had changed, and survival meant mastering an entirely different game. "We need firepower," Coach Williams announced, swerving around an overturned truck. Pete's condition deteriorated in the back seat, his breathing shallow. Miller's hunting supplies is 2 blocks ahead. The 2-story brick building stood relatively untouched amid the chaos. The heavy security gate hung halfway down, leaving just enough space to slip under. Coach Williams parked close to the entrance, engine running. 5 minutes, he said. Grab what you can carry. We found the store's owner behind the counter, or what remained of him. His shotgun lay beside him, 1 shell spent. At least he'd gone down fighting. The display cases were already shattered, but plenty remained on the shelves. I grabbed a Remington 870 and boxes of shells while Coach Williams collected handguns and ammunition. The baseball bat had served me well, but this new world demanded more lethal solutions. A thud from upstairs froze us in place. Coach Williams pointed to himself, then the stairs. I nodded, covering the front entrance. His footsteps creaked on old wood as he ascended. A single gunshot cracked through the building. Moments later, Coach Williams returned with a rifle bag slung over his shoulder. Storage room's clear now. We loaded our acquisitions into the SUV. Pete had grown delirious, muttering about past games and missed calls. The CDC facility was 10 minutes away, assuming the roads stayed passable. The city's transformation accelerated around us. Military helicopters thundered overhead. Smoke billowed from burning buildings. Infected roamed the streets in growing numbers, drawn to any sign of life. The CDC complex appeared ahead, a fortress of concrete and steel surrounded by a mob of infected. Armed guards manned the perimeter fence. A line of vehicles stretched from the gate as people sought shelter or answers. "No time to wait," Coach Williams muttered, hitting the gas. We accelerated toward the gate, horn blaring. Guards raised their weapons. "CDC personnel," I shouted through the window. "Dr. Marshall, it's Pete, your brother, he's been bitten." The guards exchanged looks, then opened the gates. We screeched to a stop in a concrete bay as medical personnel approached the vehicle. Dr. Marshall rushed from the building, her lab coat billowing. Her face crumpled when she saw Pete's condition. "I'm sorry," she said, voice breaking. "Once they're bitten, there's nothing we can do. Most of our senior researchers vanished when this started. The few of us left are working blind. We don't even know what caused this." A commotion erupted at the perimeter. A massive group of infected had broken through the outer fence, drawn by the noise and movement of the survivor vehicles. "We need help on the west wall," a guard shouted. Coach Williams grabbed our newly acquired weapons, tossing me the shotgun. "One last play," he said grimly. We joined the defenders using our baseball-trained aim to deadly effect. The forklift near the gate gave me an idea. Cover me. I sprinted to the vehicle, starting it up. The infected swarmed toward the noise, exactly what I wanted. I drove straight into their mass, pushing them back against the fence. Coach Williams and the guards picked off the stragglers with precision. In minutes, we had cleared the breach. Pete's final moments were mercifully quick. His sister handled it personally, ensuring he wouldn't become one of them. We laid him to rest behind the facility, marking the spot with his prized bat. Dr. Marshall showed us communications from Montana, a secure military facility gathering survivors, scientists, and supplies, a chance to regroup and fight back. We planned to leave at first light, joining other survivors in a heavily armed convoy. In less than 12 hours, our world had shattered, but we had a destination, weapons, and purpose. I watched the stadium through the facility's fence, its silhouette stark against the darkening sky. The game had changed forever. Tomorrow we'd start playing by new rules, and this time, we're playing for keeps.